What's up, Vidme? So, first of all, sorry about the mic quality of this episode. It's been a while since I made a podcast, partly because my mic is broken. My normal mic that takes phantom power and is a lot nicer than this one. Let me adjust the levels here, get it right. Yeah, so sorry this mic is a little more bassy. Apologies about that off the start. And what are we talking about today? Well, there's been a lot of people, especially Jerry One, talking about how, I guess people say that, if you're a libertarian, you can, you should advocate for open borders or, open borders are the right way to go if you're a libertarian. And I kind of wanted to do a refutation of that because I don't agree that that as a libertarian it's a good idea to have open borders. Now, I think some people are right about the fact that, hypothetically speaking, somebody crossing your border is not an act of aggression per se, but that being said, it's still, I don't think you can have open borders in a libertarian society. And I'm going to run through some points about why that is. It's been a while since, I made a video, as I said, so this might be a little choppy. Kind of been doing a lot more music lately, and I might shift gears and do some more political things, but we'll see how it goes. Anyway, so the first point is that without a border, you don't even have a country. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you don't have a border, it doesn't really matter whether you're a libertarian country, whether you're, I guess a republic, a democracy. If you don't have a border, you don't even have a country. So I guess we need to at least secure the borders if we're going to have a libertarian society. You're not going to really have any society, in my opinion, without a border. Because people can just walk across, do any horrible thing, and then just leave your country. Like, you don't have any control over the people that are coming into your country. You don't really have any control over the rules inside your country because people can just come in and out as they please. So I don't even think you can call it the United States of America without having a border. And I personally, as I've said before, I love this country, so to just have people walking in and out is unacceptable to me. It doesn't matter how libertarian I want to be, what I want the laws to be as far as prostitution and drug laws go. It doesn't really matter because if people can just waltz in and out, we don't even have a country. And so my next point is that, tribes have been warring since the very beginning of man. So if you look back in history, you'll find that people have always been fighting each other. This is nothing new. If you look through a history book, people are constantly fighting over land, resources, women, pretty much anything of value. People have always fought over. Now, I would love to think that, we live in a world where people, wouldn't hurt each other, wouldn't steal from each other, everybody's a good person. That's simply not the case. I lived in Detroit at 5 in Livernois, and if you've ever been to Detroit before, not to pick on Detroit, but it is a fucking hellhole. I mean, if you think that people are fundamentally good, and a lot of them are poor, so they don't really have a choice. I guess you still have a choice, but people are not fundamentally good. I mean, I've seen some fucked up things living in Detroit, and I don't live there anymore, luckily. This was like right when I graduated high school. But basically, I learned at a young age that people are not fundamentally good. I mean, a lot of it has to do with the way you raise your children. And actually, that's part of, why you need a border, because you want to maintain your culture. That's how children are raised. I mean, you grow up in a certain environment, and you raise your children in that environment, and that becomes culture. So if you have people just waltzing in and out, you really can't maintain a homeostasis within your culture. And people aren't fundamentally good. So if people were fundamentally good, you might be able to say, okay, well, we could have, no borders. But as it stands right now, people have been fighting, like I said, since the beginning of time. I mean, you've got warring tribes. You've got, one monarch versus another. You've got the Roman Empire versus, other, smaller states at the time. And you've also got, the Egyptians and I really don't have any specific examples of people fighting back that far because I really haven't researched history that much. But I do know that, there's violence all throughout history. There's always been violence. There's always been slavery. There's always been, acts of aggression. So just because you're not committing acts of aggression doesn't mean that other people aren't. And that's an important distinction for this discussion, because you could say as a libertarian, well, yeah, it's the non-aggression principle. If somebody just walks across your border, you don't have a right to do that. Well, Jerry One makes a really good point, and he says, like, open borders for your house. So at what point, you have to draw the line somewhere, because people are not fundamentally good in all cases. I mean, I give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Like, when I first walk up to somebody, I don't assume that they're anything. I wait for, the way they treat me, and then from then on, I treat them that way. And I give everybody a baseline level of respect, but that is not the norm. I mean, that's not necessarily, not everybody does that. So you have to be able to draw the border somewhere. And in your house, like, you don't want anybody just strolling in and out, because people are going to steal from you. You know what I mean? Or they're going to break your stuff. I mean, you ever been to a college party? I mean, people, even like rich kids, you know what I mean? They'll break your stuff. They'll steal your stuff. I mean, it's unbelievable. And these are people that are supposed to be your friends, right? Like, who here has been to a college party? I mean, you've got people there now. Obviously, like, some of them don't get invited or whatever, but, like, you could even have people that, like, know your friends that come over and they end up trashing your shit. So imagine if you just had, like, no border whatsoever. I mean, that's like basically a college party where anybody can walk in. You know what I mean? And if you've ever been to one of those, I mean, the level of people that come in, or the quality of people, just goes exponentially down, or logarithmically down, or whatever. But it gets worse and worse as you allow more people in. So essentially, it's like the same thing, and to kind of tie that back in, you have to control the quality of people that are coming in order to have a libertarian society. I'll get, I guess, more into that in a little bit, but another thing is the social contract for libertarianism is way too lenient to allow for anybody to just stroll in and out. So, and what's an example of that? Well, let's see here. So, if you're in a libertarian society, I mean, theoretically, like I've said before, you legalize drugs, you legalize prostitution, because those things don't necessarily, like, you could do drugs all you want in your house and it's not going to hurt anybody. Now, we could argue about whether, legalizing things like opiates would be a good idea, because I do feel as though opiates are, they're so addictive that I'm not sure that, I mean, while it is your right to use them, I think that the downsides, like, so heavily outweigh the benefits that, I mean, because they're so addictive. I mean, and a lot of the stimulants, a lot of the psychedelics and other drugs are not quite that addictive. I mean, they're all addictive. Everything's addictive. But at the same time, like, you can do a lot of the stimulants all you want and then just stop. And, I mean, unless you've been doing them for years, day to day, you know what I mean, you'll be fine. Whereas with opiates, like, if you do them several days in a row, you're heavily addicted right then and there, and you're going to get sick. So anyway, but to get back, what I was saying is the libertarian social contract is too lenient to allow people to walk in and out. So if you have a libertarian society, somebody just walks across the border, and they might come from a country where these substances are heavily restricted, or prostitution's heavily restricted, and they just make really dumb decisions because they haven't been cultured into that environment. Now, if you grow up in a society where, let's say psychedelics are legal, where marijuana is legal, where, certain, I guess you could say, like, barbiturates and things like that, prostitution, if you grow up around that, then I think that's a way different thing than if you just, like, if you come from a restrictive authoritarian society and then you just walk across the border and start using these substances, you're not going to know how to handle it. It's going to be like, something that you're not used to. So you have to develop a culture around responsible use. I mean, because the whole idea is you don't want to use these substances and then, or even, I guess you could say, exploit people in other ways. well, that was kind of, never mind, forget that. But anyway, like a big part of libertarianism is the fact that, you would end the drug war. So what I'm saying is, like, if people can just walk in and out and you don't have control over the quality of people in your country, substances are going to make it way worse. Like, if somebody who's already a bad person comes over and then they get addicted to some type of opiate, I mean, you're going to have huge problems because that person's just going to go around stealing from everybody in order to afford that. And they haven't been conditioned to know what to look for as far as like when they're starting to have a problem and all that. So you basically got people walking in and out, abusing the social contract, and then they can just leave because it's open borders, by the way. I mean, they could just walk back to their country, you know what I mean? So they could come in, abuse the system, hurt somebody because they got addicted to this stuff, and then just leave. And so I think you have to have a more exclusive club if you're going to allow for more lenient things like that. So very first thing you'd have to make sure that you have a certain quality of people coming in. It allows for too much. I mean, because libertarianism basically at the core says that, I mean, if you're now, like I said before, you can't just walk down the streets and shoot heroin. You know what I mean? That would never be legal. Or even like, you can't just walk down the streets and just like take like 5 tabs of acid. You know what I mean? That wouldn't be allowed because you could end up hurting somebody else. This is like within the comfort of your own home. But then again, like somebody comes over from another country and they're not used to the whole culture of, libertarianism. They just come over and think like, oh, I can just like, take all these drugs and just walk down the street. And really, I don't think that would be ideal. I mean, it's basically saying that, as long as because that starts infringing on other people's rights. Then you're going to do fucked up things in front of them. And, you could end up hurting somebody. You could end up, influencing their kids in the wrong way. You really don't want to involve other people. So the whole idea is, as long as you're, in your own space or whatever, and you're not hurting anybody, then there's no problem. And if you're paying taxes to keep society in order, you're paying taxes for fund the military, against foreign invaders. You're doing all that. You're working and all that. You're allowed to. I think you should be allowed a little bit of extra freedom. So the whole idea is like if you have a libertarian society and you've been paying taxes your whole life, you got a right to do these things. But if you're just somebody who hasn't paid any taxes and you just come over and abuse this awesome system that we have, which allows us to, to basically have this freedom, you didn't pay into that. You didn't help out with that. You're just abusing our orderly society that we work so hard to create. I mean, I go to work 5 days a week, and I don't go on vacation. I don't call in sick. I mean, unless I'm like super actually sick, you know what I mean? And I can't work, but I work my ass off. And part of that, part of the reason that I don't necessarily mind paying taxes, I mean, and like, I would like to see the taxes lowered and all that and spending lowered. But frankly, at the end of the day, I mean, I really don't mind paying taxes because I see an orderly society and I'd like to change it so that we have more liberty or even the status quo because really we're pretty free, as I've said before. But anyway, the whole point is like, I work all day. Like I'm not working so that somebody can just stroll across the border, do a bunch of heroin and then go back to Mexico. Not that they would, that's a bad example, but like, let's say there's open borders. I mean, you could come over from like the Philippines, you know what I mean, where it's like super, straight lace and all that shit. Like, I'm not fucking paying taxes all day so that you can just stroll over here and abuse our social contract. Like, I'm the one paying for law enforcement. I'm the one paying for the military. You guys aren't, and those things restore order, or they keep order, and that's why I bring that up, because we have an orderly society partly because there's laws. I mean, that is, in my opinion, the case. I mean, you could be an anarcho-capitalist all day and say like, oh, you don't need laws, etc. I do think you need laws. I mean, I think you need to secure your borders, you need to secure your streets and all that. But at the same time, there's things I'd like to change. You know what I mean? Like, as I've said before, so I won't really hammer that point home. But that's kind of where I'm coming from, is like, you maintain this social order and then you get the extra amount of freedom because of it. But if you can just walk across the border and you don't have to actually help out with any of the, the legwork, and you can just enjoy these extra freedoms, I mean, maybe eventually down the line that might happen, but I mean, we're so far from that reality right now that we have to at least secure our area. So, and even if the borders aren't secure now, I mean, like I said, in order to get to a libertarian society, I think you'd have to do that. So I guess I'll transition to my next point. So the social contract is too lenient for libertarianism, and you can actually see the opposite when you look at Europe. So, I mean, if you look at Europe right now, they've got like a huge migrant crisis, and you can see like that the exact opposite of libertarianism is happening there, because they've got armed patrols everywhere. It's turning into a massive police state, you know what I mean? And just like an authoritarian place to even be safe, right? So what I'm saying is, like, you can extrapolate in the opposite direction if you look at Europe, because look at their streets. I mean, they've got like people driving trucks into crowds of people and stuff. I mean, they've got a bunch of people coming in that didn't really help build that society, that are just taking advantage of it with a completely different religion, completely different culture. And so if you look at the opposite, so if you take like, okay, Europe is completely open borders right now. Like, you can go anywhere if you're a European. So, and what's happening in a lot of places like France and stuff, I mean, they're seeing a massive increase in the authoritarian direction. So, I mean, the more exclusive a club is, the less security you need. So, if you've ever been to a club before, right? Now, or a music festival, perfect example. So if you've ever noticed like bigger music festivals, I mean, there's security everywhere because anybody's allowed in. You know what I mean? Whereas, let's say you have a club where only a few people are allowed in, then, people can basically do whatever they want and you don't have a lot of security. Like, if I throw a show and I have 50 of my close friends, I don't need any security, because it's a very exclusive club. Now, if I throw a show with 50,000 people that I don't know, how much security you think is going to be there? There's going to be security everywhere. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have that, but I mean, the bigger the place gets, the less freedom you're going to be allowed, because you can't, I mean, as you start to widen your circle, you start to have more people who you can't necessarily be sure that they're a good person, or that they're, anything, that they have morals, that they're, you just don't know. So in a country sense, it's the same way. I mean, as your club gets more exclusive, which is like the more you close your borders, the more exclusive your club becomes. Now, we've already got 300 million people. That's totally fine. I mean, and I have no problem with diversity. I mean, if you're black, white, Mexican, Asian, Indian, any race under the sun, I don't care. I'm personally not for a homogenous ethno-state or whatever. I mean, I'm a libertarian, and like, I listen to a lot of people like Stefan Molyneux who would disagree, and that's fine. I mean, I think he makes some excellent points about it. But I personally don't really care what race you are. I care about only the quality of your character. Absolutely only the quality of your character. However, as I said, if you have open borders, your club becomes completely unexclusive. It'd be like having a club where you just let anybody in, which is totally fine, but you're going to have a lot of security. So that's kind of like the opposite of what a libertarian state would be. I mean, if you have people just walking across the border, they could walk across with bombs. You don't know. I mean, they could walk across with anything. You know what I'm saying? So you have to at least kind of secure that border so that you can have that more exclusive club, so you can allow for more leniency as far as, your social laws. So yeah, I won't really talk too much about that. Now, back to like what I was saying about theoretically it'd be fine. So, I mean, you could say, as I said before, that, the non-aggression principle, etc. But in practice, that's just not possible. I mean, it hasn't been done. I mean, I think a lot of these open borders libertarians are just up high in the sky, up in the ether, which is totally fine if you're listening to music. I mean, when I'm listening to music, I'm listening to music to space the fuck out. You know what I mean? Meet the hexagod. You know what I mean? Like, just kind of get in that space where like you're only there with sacred geometry and symmetry and all that shit. That's what I do when I listen to music. When I'm doing politics, I'm not talking theoretically. I'm talking about like actual practice. Like, this is something we can do. And in my opinion, like, you can't, I mean, how would you even have a country? I mean, these people who are saying like they're open borders libertarians, it's like you're not thinking about it practically. You're thinking about it philosophically, and that's fine if you want to talk philosophically, but don't confuse that with what you can actually do. I mean, that's insane. Like, you can't just let anybody walk in and out. And I've seen, in these libertarian groups that I'm in, people are like, oh, you're really like a Republican. You're not actually a libertarian because you're not for open borders. It's like bullshit. Like, you're paid off. You're a paid off globalist. Like, or you actually believe this and you're just dumb. I mean, you cannot have it. And I'll go back to, you can go back and listen to that again. I really don't need to talk too much more about it, but I'm just saying, like, quit talking theoretically. I mean, we're not up in the ether here. We're down, in the world. If you want to go up and go up in the ether, then go listen to some music. You know what I mean? We're having a political discussion here. And if you're not talking practically, then you're useless. So yeah, that's on the people who are talking about, oh, you're not a real libertarian because you're not for open borders. Bullshit. Go back and listen to that. So I think once we attain a level of spiritual enlightenment, it might be more possible to open our doors up to more people. But the problem is you've got people coming in from countries who aren't spiritually enlightened. So it's really not something that you can, like, I mean, let's face it, most of the countries are not anywhere near as free as America. So if you have people going in and out, they're not going to be anywhere near as far as, like, accustomed to our level of freedom. Ooh, a little bit of coffee here. So I guess my next point is that we all discriminate. I mean, and the thing is, like, discrimination is a natural human instinct and it's necessary. So you have to discriminate a little bit. Just because you're a libertarian doesn't mean that you're not going to discriminate. I mean, I discriminate against people all the time. I walk by people and I don't want to talk to them. I mean, and not because necessarily, like, I think that they're bad people, but just because I discriminate the people that I talk to. Now, if I do happen to talk to you, I'm going to treat you with a baseline level of respect. And even if I'm not talking to you, I'm going to treat you like a beautiful human being that, that is my brother, essentially. Until you do something to me. However, I still discriminate. I mean, I'm not going to go up to, like, some, 80-year-old guy and ask him to go hang out with me, you know what I mean? And like drink a beer with him or something like that. I mean, it's just not going to happen because there's there's no reason for it. And then when I see certain people that, I can just kind of tell, like, but based on the way they're talking, or if they say something like they steal from people, I'm going to discriminate against that person and not hang out with them. You know what I mean? If I know people that steal, I'm going to try and avoid them basically at all costs. So, and the thing is, like, we all discriminate. Like, if you say you don't discriminate, then just let anybody walk in your house. You know what I mean? Like, we all discriminate. So to say that you're, that this is discrimination, it's necessary. Like, you have to discriminate against certain people, or else, I mean, you're just going to get taken advantage of. Bad things are going to happen to you. So discrimination is part of the reason that you need open borders. And it's, like I said, it's something we all do. And so my next point is, like, I kind of want to talk a little bit about what Trump's doing. And now, I don't agree with Trump on everything. Like, there's a lot of things that I disagree with the man on. But there's also, I think, like, I don't really know. I mean, he could just be, just there for show or whatever. But, I mean, I think the man really had good intentions and still has good intentions. I think he's being stonewalled on a lot of things. I think he's also realizing that as the president, it's a lot harder to get things done than he thought. And so I give him a chance. I mean, I know he's not perfect. He's a billionaire, you know what I mean? So he's definitely done some shady stuff. I mean, but at the same time, I mean, he was put in a position and he was able to maintain his business. I mean, he's still got properties all over the world. So the man is a good businessman. Now, is he involved with other shady stuff? I have no idea. That's all speculation. I can only judge what he does and what he doesn't do. And I wish that he would, ease up a little bit on, like, because Jeff Sessions is so against the whole pot thing. And, like, I wish he would have Jeff Sessions ease up a little bit on that. I mean, it's not my call. I'm not the president. But I wish they would ease up because I really don't think marijuana is that big of a deal. So that's something I don't agree with him on. However, I think it's awesome that he is trying to secure our border because, as I've said before, I mean, you can't even have a libertarian society without having a border. So even if Trump isn't a libertarian, I mean, we might be able to get more liberty once we start securing our club. You know what I mean? Once we start making it so that, it's more exclusive or whatever. And I think that's part of the idea behind what he's doing. At least I hope it is. So we'll see what he does. Like I'm not going to give the guy a pass on everything. And as far as like the whole Syria thing, I mean, we're still over in Syria, but I don't think he really has much of a choice over that. I think the generals tell him what to do. I think there's powerful people that are influencing it. I really don't think Trump himself wants to get involved. I think it's just not really a choice. You know what I mean? Like, if your military tells you got to do this, and then who knows, they might be influenced by contractors and stuff who just want to make money. I'm not really going to go into that too far because, there's really not much you can do about it. I bless the people who are speaking out against it, but the military-industrial complex is just such a machine. It's like you can't really fuck with them. You know what I mean? So I think Donald Trump is no different. If you listen to him on the campaign trail, he genuinely seemed like he didn't want to be interventionist. I just think like once he got into office, he realized like, oh shit, like I can't really do anything about this, so he's just rolling with it. Keep in mind also, the guy probably doesn't want to make any more enemies, and like if he goes along with what the military industrial complex wants, they're going to protect him. If he doesn't, they're not going to protect him. So the guy's just doing what he's got to do, in my opinion. I don't think he really wants to do that, though. You look at the old videos of him, he just looks like an old rich businessman. And frankly, like I said before, I'm a hippie, so I really don't believe that money's everything. But at the same time, if you're handed, that investment money from your father and then you turn it into a bunch of money, it's going to change you, you know what I mean? And the guy's a man, you know what I'm saying? Like he's a man and he does what he's going to do. I don't fight him on everything. I don't agree with him on everything. I just kind of like look at each individual thing that he does and then kind of go from there. But anyway, that's kind of like an aside. But what I'm saying is like, I do think like him trying to secure the border is a good thing. So, maybe with that, we can pave the way for a more libertarian society once we've got a secured border. And we'll see what happens. But yeah, so that's kind of like a little aside or whatever. And also, I think the last thing I want to close with is that I think ultimately you can't really have a libertarian society without being slightly conservative in America. We started out as a libertarian society. Like the whole drug war, the whole prostitution thing, that all used to be completely legal. It wasn't until like the moralists came in, the religious moralists, and started saying like, oh, we need to get rid of all this stuff, because it's too, the children and all that. But I do think like you do need a certain level of conservatism, because if you go too far off the deep end, then you're not going to have a society anymore. So it's like a balance, you know what I mean? Like you can't just be fucked up all the time. If you want to live in a libertarian society, like being fucked up all the time is not an option. Like you got to go to work all day, you got to get your shit done, you got to create value for society, and then when it's time to unwind, then whatever you want to use to unwind is your option. But I do think like you have to maintain that level of semblance, of a society. So if you just go too far left and you just create this like authoritarian, society, that's so far from libertarianism that you can't do it. And also, like, keep in mind, conservatives are supposed to be for smaller government. So the whole idea is, the government kind of scales back the whole like telling you not to smoke plants and shit like that, and like eat mushrooms and etc. And then in exchange, you have to be more conservative yourself. Like you have to take in that extra level of responsibility not to go hurt people, not to go around fucked up and all that shit, and then you get afforded that extra liberty. So I do think that libertarianism is a pretty much exclusively conservative value, in my opinion. As I've said before, there's an old video that I did, why you can't be a libertarian and a socialist, and if you have any questions about that, you can go listen to that. I kind of go into detail about it, but I just want to say, like, I would almost rather vote Republican just for the namesake. But at the same time, the neocons have infiltrated the Republican Party to the point where it's like, I do think we should have a third option, but I'd hate to see the Libertarian Party split up the party that's supposed to be for small government. But let's face it, they're not, you know what I mean? But maybe we can change that. And I've talked in previous podcasts about why small government's good. It's simply because the extra bureaucracy ends up spending too much money. So when you reduce the level of bureaucracy, then you can afford to spend more money on the social programs that are required in order to sustain a libertarian society. So anyway, I think that's going to wrap it up. I've been talking for a while. You guys have a great day, and peace.